Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 2 of the Project Manager. We've got a lot to cover in this episode. We're going to go over the scheduling function and how do we get that, where we left off last week. We've also got brand new attachments folder and a few other features while we build this amazing application. I can't wait to show you all these cool features, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you have not had the chance, please go ahead and check out the Dashboard Masterclass. It's an amazing 15-hour single-click application. I'm going to teach you every single step on how I earned and learned through dashboards, and it'll help you skyrocket your freelancing career. With that dashboard, I'll include the links down below. That helps keep these videos free, and so I do appreciate that. I also have a 100 workbook promotion because we are on our 100th videos. So to announce that, I have a 100 workbook single zip file where you can access all of the previous workbooks, download them in a single workbook file. And I'm going to include the links down below for that. Of course, if you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please do that with the link. And of course, make sure you select the notifications so you can get notified of our videos each and every Tuesday. All right, thanks. Let's get started now. In part 1, we covered how to add a project, how to add new, how to cancel new. We've also added a save project. So we've covered that. And now we're going to move on to the scheduling aspect. And of course, we have a few things that we're going to work on the scheduling. We have the ability to single click a specific project or job and have that information load here. We have also a third component is a ability to put the project or job name here on the schedule. Of course, that would be the second. And the third is the ability to color code using conditional formatting the entire length of the job. So we're going to go over all that along with attachments in this week's training. And we're going to continue on part 3 next week, where we're going to add in additional features like filtering, project types, and status. So we've got a lot to cover. Plus, we're also going to set up a setup screen in the upcoming parts. So make sure you stay tuned and catch each and every episode. It's going to be amazing. I take your suggestions, your ideas, and of course, along with your comments, likes. I do appreciate that. We're going to build this out together so we can create one amazing Excel project manager. All right, let's get started. So the ability to single click on a job is a great feature. We also have the ability to color code and put the job name here. Now we have the ability when we move months back and forth to load the details of the month. That's the first macro we are going to go over. How do we load job details based on changing of the month? And of course, that can be either changing this way or selecting a specific month will change it as well. So we have that, a few of those options. So I wanted to go over that with you. And let's take a look here. So we have a macro. It's going to be called load schedule. Let's go into the developers with your developers tab here, Visual Basic, Alt F11, of course, is a shortcut to get you there. And let's take a look in a few workbooks. Now we have this selection change, and you'll notice if we select a specific job that we're going to be able to load a project. So we're going to focus on that in a moment, right? So we're going to focus on the selection change, which is this row right here. All we're going to do is take values in I4 and put in a job number. So that is how we do it. So let me just show you that again. So basically all we're doing is taking a job number, and I'll show you how we locate that job number. So for example, if we're going to put in I4, we're going to change this to 12. So that we know that changing the job number here automatically loads it. So now that we know that, let's see how we do that. So that's I4. So let's go into the worksheet change event for I4. Now this is worksheet change event right here. So now let's scroll down and look for any change on I4. And here it is right here. Load project on project number change, but not on project load. And what I mean by project load is when the project is loading, that means the details are coming into it, that we're not going to. So when we change this, we're going to have a new project here. So that we are going to have the project load turn to true. So this is going to go to true as we load the project. Then it's going to return to false once it's loaded. So we just need to make sure, all we need to make sure that B2 is false. That's all we're ensuring here. So on change of I4, that's the job number, and we're going to make sure that B2 is false. So as long as those two conditions, there's some kind of a change to I4 and B2 is false, then we're going to run a macro. And that macro is called project load. And that macro is also located in our project macros module right here. And if we look up, we see project load. So we're loading that. Now we went over that a little bit last time, but I wanted to show you how that works on the change of I4. Now we went over this macro, and all we're doing is basically loading it up using macro, but I didn't go over how that changes. So I4 is how it changes. So then how do we get that to load when we change it on a selection? How do we get this to load? Because there's no project number here. So how do we get this project number to put in here? If this project number is 5, if this project number is 11, there's no 11 here. How do we find it? Well, what I've done is I've created a similar duplicate schedule. And if we scroll all the way over to the right, you'll see all of our project numbers, So in fact, if you look here, this is column 116. That's the first day of the month. And if we look here, equals column, we are also going to see that that's 16. So we know that exactly 100 columns to the right, we are going to find our project number. There's no project number here, but if there was, we would know it. So we're going to look. If the user selects this one right here, let's look 100 columns, the same row, row 4. Let's look 100 columns to the right and see what we find. Oh, we find number 5. So we're going to take whatever number is exactly 100 columns to the right, and we're going to place that number right in here. And as soon as we do that, it's going to change. So if we change this to 12, it's automatically going to load it. Now we know we went over how this loads. So now let's go over exactly how we pull this number, and I'll go how we get to this number in a second, but how we take this number and we put it right here is very simple with just a line of code. So let's take a look at that back into the VBA. Now, of course, our actions are selection. We are actually selecting. We're not changing anything. We're selecting something on the schedule. So if we're making a change, let's take a look at the range. If we're making a change starting at P4, and I guess going all the way through AT, and then I've got it down to about somewhere about AT 37, probably about 37. So if the user makes a selection change anywhere in this, do something. What is it that we're going to do? Well, let's take a look. If not intersects target range P4 through AT37 is nothing, right? That's one condition. And there's one more condition. Now this is a multi-part. I want to check for a number. I need to make sure there's a number. Where should that number be located? That number should be located in the current row, whatever the user has selected, on the target column plus 100. That means 100 columns to the right of whatever the column they've selected. The value that's located there, the value that is found there, if it's numeric, that means if it's a number, or if it's anything else, don't do anything. But if it's a number, then do something. If it's a number, that would be true. That means it is numeric. It is a number. So we're running a test there. That way, if it's blank or includes anything else for any other reason, nothing is going to happen. Only if it is a number are we going to do something. So those two conditions. One, they select within a range, P4 through AT37. And two, the value of the value of a cell in the current row and the current column plus 100. As long as that's a number equal true, then what? Then all we're going to do is take that number, take the number that's located 100 columns to the right and place that number in I4. That's all we have to do. Just one line of code does it. And so now the next question you're asking, okay, that's great. I see how we put the number in I4, but how do we get the number into these particular cells here. So we've copied first of all, we've started out, we've copied it so that this is going to equal P3. These are just linked cells. So that means whenever the date or month changes, those cells are going to change as well. So when we go to February and we look over here, let me increase that a little bit. February 1st, you'll see, I'll just increase the column so we can see that. Okay, so now we see that the dates are changed to February because they're simply linked, P3, Q3, R3, and so on. So it's simply a link. All we're doing is linking to these cells. So whenever these cells change here, we see these cells change here. So that's how we get the date. So let's continue on. So how do we get a number here? Well, let's take a look here. There's a certain conditions. We're going to use what's called a sum product formula. And the idea is this. What I want to know is, in a few conditions, I want to know if there is a job, if there is a specific job that is, on certain conditions, assigned to Fred Fretters, that's one, and is it assigned to him on this date? Did it start before or start on the date, and is it continuing on for this date? So we need those three conditions. One, is it assigned to that specific person located in Q4? Okay, that's what we're looking for. Q4, of course, that's going to paste down, so Q4, of course, then Q5. So that's one. We're looking for this resources or employee or name. That's one condition. The other condition that we need to check for is that the project start date is less than or equal to P3. The project start date must be less than or equal. That's one condition. That's the second condition. And then the third condition is the project end date must be greater than or equal to P3. The project end date must also be greater than that. So if those conditions are all met, if there are conditions, then what I want to do is I want to get the row of that. If there are conditions, I want to find out what row. Over here in the resources here, if we look up here, it's assigned to Fred Fretters. So project number 1 is assigned to him. So we know based on that information that it does meet those requirements. Okay, so now as long as we know all that, we can plug that into a sum product formula and pull out the results. So then the next thing you know is if those conditions are all met, and I need to know what the project number is. I need to find that. I need to run an index. And so where all of those are true, where all those conditions are true, I need to know which one it is. Okay, so if you look in here, so we've got those three items here. The project name is equal to Q4. The start date is less than or equal to P3, and of course the project end date is greater than. Now I need to find a row that all of those conditions are met. And if we look in the project resources, we can find all of that information. Let's look at row number 3, which is project number 1. We have a start date that is less than or equal to February 1st. That is true. We have an end date that is greater than or equal to February 1st. And we have an assigned resources with the name of Fred Fretters. So those three conditions are met. 1, 2, 3. So when all three of those conditions are met, then I need to run an index and find the row, and find the project number. That sum product formula is going to do all of that for us. It's going to run an index on whenever these three conditions are met, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to find the project row. Now we've done some named ranges on these so that we can help us. So let's take a look at the name ranges that I have created for this. If we go into the formulas and name manager, and we take a look at the project end date, we have project number here, project resources, project number. And if we tab over here and look at this, we have a dynamic range based on the project number. Of course, we're going to use A2 through A99, just a large number here. We're going to count all of the ones with values, and that's going to get us our dynamic range. And remember, we're starting at 2, which is the header row, and moving 1 down because in case there's no data, we don't want any errors in our named range. So of course, we must contain that header row. And the same thing here, containing the header row, of course, subtracting 1, that's going to get us all the values we need. So of course, we have our project number here. We also have our project start date here. So that's the name range, project resource start date, and of course the last one, project resource end date. So we've given name ranges to all those, and of course they're all dynamic. So as the table changes, these named ranges will increase as well. So now that we know all of those, and of course we have the name, the resource name here, so those 4 conditions. So we have all those 4, so we can use those 4 named ranges in our sum product formula. Back into the project manager, let's take a closer look at this formula. One, we're indexing. We're going to start with an index. Why do we index it? Because we need to locate the row. I need to locate the row, and I need to pull the project number from it. So I'm going to index the project numbers, the project residential index numbers. I want to pull the numbers. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a project number, so that's what we're going to be indexing. Now the rest of our formula is going to help us find the row. I need to know what row is it. And the row is when those conditions are met. 3 different conditions are met. 1, the project resource name equals 04, so we've got that. That's Fred Fretters. Another condition is the start date must be less than or equal to P3, and notice how the row is constant while P is dynamic. So the column is dynamic here while the row remains a constant. It's fixed, it's absolute, the row, while the P is dynamic. Okay, so we've got that, and we've got the project resident, the end date, it must be greater than P3. So as we drag this formula, it's going to work just fine. So that's the 3rd condition. So when all of these 3 conditions are met, the name, the start date, and the end date, when they're all met, then what I want to do is I want to find the row. What is the row? The row of the project number. This is going to multiply it times the project number. That's going to get us our row. And then we're going to subtract 2. Why are we subtracting 2? Well, that is because our rows start on row 3. So we must subtract 2 to get us the actual row number. And that's going to index because our named range starts on 1, right? 1, our first row is going to be here. Our first find is going to be here. So if the return's 1, that's going to get us our project number. So that's why we need to subtract 2, because our first value starts here on row 3. All right, back into the code. So you see our sum project row number -2, and of course the column, we just want column 1. We're indexing, all this work, we just get the row here. This all gets us the row, and then we're going to we're indexing the single column because we only want the project number, so it's in it. And of course, if there's an error, we're going to wrap it in a blank. If there's any kind of an error it's not found, we just want a blank space. That formula is going to get us our project number. So that's how we have our project number. And if you'll see, there's a lot of projects. If we use the previous month and we look into January, you'll see there's a lot of them. So all I did was just create one formula, and I took and I dragged this formula all the way across and then all the way down, because we use our absolute. Notice O is absolute because why is O absolute? Because I need to have just a single column where our assigned resources are located, and that's in O, column O there. So that's going to stay fixed, except the row is going to change. So the column stays fixed. And of course the date's just the opposite. The row stays fixed. The row stays fixed, but the column is absolute. All right, next thing, there's a small change. If you look at it, this month goes to January 31st, but if we go to the next month, we'll see that's only February 28th. And each of these formulas is basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the date. I'm starting off with the date of X2. The date, of course, it's the year of X2, whatever year they've selected. B5 would be the month number, B5. Of course, remember, our month is located in B5. And then 1, because I want to start on the first day of the month. So that's all. It's very simple. That's how we get the first date. And then, of course, it's just +1 after that. So we just keep doing +1, and we drag that all the way over. That's going to get us all the dates. But when we get to the end, what I want to do is I want to show if there's a month like for example, February only has 28 days. I want to make sure it's blank. I don't want any date to show up here. And so how did I do that? Well, it's just a little bit of a formula. Basically, what I want to do is I want to check, and I want to say if the month of this date, February 28th, is different than the month of this date, February 28th +1, then show blank. And I've done that just here. So here's what we're saying. If the month of AQ3 does not equal the month of AQ, in other words, just one more day, if the day after is not the same month, if these 2 months are different, then just show a blank. Otherwise, assuming that they are the same month, then just AQ3 plus 1. And of course, if there's an error, blank again. So I have to use this same formula for the last 3 spots of the month, and that's blank. So that way the dates are dynamic based on the selection of the month. So that's how we get the different dates of the month. And so now we know how we obtain the numbers. Now we know how we display the numbers, and we know how we look for the numbers so that when we select a cell, we know to look 100 columns over to find the number and pull that number into I4. That automatically loads that project. Okay, next up, how do we get these names to appear in the schedule? So we know how do we get these job names to appear here in the schedule? Well, that's through a macro. Let's go over that macro now. Into the developer's code, Visual Basic, we're going to look on the schedule macros here. We have the project schedule load. Project schedule load. That is the macro that runs when we load a month, when we change a month or change a year. So we automatically get that to load up. So we've mentioned a few things, and the basic idea is this. What I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter. Let's take a look at our assigned project resources here, because this is what I want to focus on. This is what we have the start date. And I want to put the start date using a formula so that there's no problem in the criteria. So I want to know if the start date is either greater than P3, what is P3, or less than the end of the month. P3, let's just take a quick look. P3 is here, right? So what I want to know is if the start date is greater than or equal to P3, or the end date, or the start date is, if it's starting before the end of the month, if there's a job that starts on the last day of the month, I also want it to show up here. So I'm focused on the start date, just the start date. If that start date falls anywhere from the first of the month to the last of the month, then I need to display it, then I need to filter that. So let's take a look at that. So if the start date is a formula greater than or equals to P3. P3 is the first date of the month. That's part one filter. The next filter is this. If the end of the month, P3, right, 0 months ahead, 0 months before, if the end date is less than or equal end of month, okay, so less than equal. So the start date, when we run our advanced filter, we're going to take all of these dates. I'm going to look in the start date. I'm looking for this column only. If that job, if the start date falls within any of these conditions, then I want you to return the values here. So let's take a look at that. And this project number is completely ignored. It's just ignored. All we're focusing on is these two. Project number we use for the different filter. Okay, so all we're focusing on is the 2 start dates. So those 2 conditions must be met. If it is, then put them here. So let's take a look here under the previous month and the next month. So now let's go back into the resources and we'll take a look into the project resources. Okay, so now you'll see the project numbers cleared out. We have our start date and end date, and now all of the results are within that days. That means the start date here is equal to or greater than January 1st, or the start date is less than or equal to the end of the month, the last day of the month. So when all of those conditions are met, please list it here. Two criteria, both on the start date. So both of these criteria must be met. The start date must fall between these 2 dates. And remember, in past, we've put a date in here. I use a formula. I urge you to use a formula because this is going to work regardless of the date format. And we have had problems in the past with like the meeting schedulers where I just put a date in there and it works fine for me. But you'll see if you have different date formats, it creates problem. Formulas work fantastic. So we'll keep formulas. We'll keep using the formulas. That way you won't have any issues running this filter. In fact, if you have an older meeting schedule, all you need to do is update it with a formula like this. It'll work just perfect. Okay, so keep that in mind if you remember a meeting scheduler. All right, so now we have all of our information here. We have all of our jobs. Now what we want to do is we want to take this project name here and I want to load it in. I want to take this project name and I want to, for example, I want to load site design. We know site design starts on the start date of 20th. And we also know that that's column 20th. 20 plus what? 20 plus, let's take a look. So we want site design to appear right here, right? Equals column. What column is that? That is column 35, right? So all we need to do is add, let me double check that, right? Actually, I think it's equal to column 16. Okay, so if number 1 is on 16, all we need to do is add 15. So remember, if our day is the first day and we want that job to appear right here, we need to add 15 columns plus the date. 15 columns plus the date. If our job, we want it to land on the 20th, we're going to do 15 columns plus the date. 15 columns plus the date is the 20th, right? That's going to get us 35. That way we know the column. We know it's got to go in column 35. How do we know? It's on January 20th. So we add 15 plus 20 equals 35. 20 is the date. 15 is our starting column. Okay, so we know what column place, but how do we know what row? How do we know what row? Well, let's take a look into the VBA. We also know that Fred appears on the first one, so all we need to do is just run a little bit of a find through the code. So let's go back into the code and walk you through it now that you have some idea of how we're going to place them. We also need to know the last project row. We're going to be running a filter, an advanced filter on our project resources. So I need to know the last row here as we run our advanced filter. In this case, it's 16. Okay, so the last results row, that's very important. What is the last row of the results? In this case, of course, it's 16. So we need to know that. That's where our results are going to be. Next up, we also want to know the results row. We're going to run through these results rows, so I need to keep track of each one. We're going to starting at 3 and go all the way to 16. I need to keep track of what row we're on, so that's going to help us. Keep track having a results row. Those are all long variables. The project schedule row, we need to know what row on the schedule that we're going to be focused on, of course. We're going to be, this would be row 4, so we need to keep track of what row we're on. That's important. So we need to know what row to actually place that on. We need to know what row and what column. Both of those are important. So the project schedule column is next. The last schedule row, that's important. We're going to need to know that. And of course, the schedule row as long. We did that project schedule. We may have both of those. Found job as a range. I'm going to be looking for a job, so we need to find that, right? I need to find that, so we'll be looking at that. All right, let's continue on. We're going to stop the calculation. That speeds everything up. We're primarily focused on sheet 1. First thing I want to do on sheet 1 is clear any existing projects. That's very important, right? We want to clear out when we're refreshing it. We want to make sure we want to just take all these projects and just, clear them out, delete them. So we're going to start over at P4 and go all the way through AT and then down. We're going to clear all of those cells out, all the way to AT37. If you've got more resources, you definitely want to increase this well beyond 37. So keep that in mind. B5 is equal to the application worksheet function match R2. What is that? Well, let's take a look at R2. What are we matching in R2? R2, of course, is the month. So I need to find the month. I need to know what month we're on, and we're going to run a match. So the month is located here in our months, right? So I want to find that month. I want to know what month it is. In this case, it's month 1, and I want to make sure that month is put right there in B5. B5, I want to match, find this, whatever, if it's found in 1 or 2, and I want to put that month right here. I want to place that right there. So that's going to be B5. Using the application worksheet function match, that's the same match that we use in formulas inside. So we're going to look for that. We're looking for that within the months range. We've defined that months range already in part 1, and we want an exact match. So we're going to use 0. All right, moving right ahead. Now we're getting ready to run our advanced filter, and I did describe that to you briefly on sheet 4. That, of course, is our project resources. That contains all the important data that we're going to run through. And of course, the first thing we want to do also on sheet 4 is clear any previous criteria and results. So we're going to clear H3, that is the job number. We're not focused on any job number in this case, so we want to clear that out, of project number. And so we want to clear out H3. We're not worried about that. We're not going to clear these out. These are formulas. They remain constant. So we definitely want to keep those in there. So we're only clearing out H3. And of course, we're going to clear out all the results, and the results are contained between L3 and R in just a large row. So we're going to clear all that out, delete all of that before we run our new advanced filter. So we need to clear all that up, and so we can do that with this line of code. This is going to clear all that out. And then of course I need to determine the last project row. Sheet 4, we're using column A and XL up. That's going to get us our last row. I need to know that last row because we're going to run a filter starting in A2 all the way to G in the last row. We're going to use the criteria I2 through J3. We're going to use that as a criteria. And of course, our results are going to be coming over through L2 through R. And we want unique values. So those are the three components: the main data, the filter criteria, and the filter results. And we can use just one line of code with our advanced filter to get that. Sheet 4A2G is the last column and the last project row. What are we doing with that data? We're running an advanced filter. And what do we want to do with that? I want to copy that. I want to copy it to a new location. Of course, we're going to use the criteria. Those two dates that I just described to you, those are located in I2, must include the headers here, I2 through J3. And what I want to do, I want to copy those results. I want to copy them to the range L2 through R2. And unique is false is fine in case we have similar fields. False is just fine. Okay, so we've got that. Now we've got our data. Now I just need to know, I need to get the last results row. In this case, our last results row is 16. But what if there is no data? What if it's less than 3? Then we can exit out. We're not going to be copying anything into this because there's nothing there. So we need to run a check to make sure that there actually is data. So the last row is going to be sheet 4 using column L where our results are going to go. We're going to get the last row, last results row. If the last results row is less than 3, then go to no data. We're going to skip all of that, and we're going to go down to right here. So we're going to skip all that, skip the loop. All right, now we're ready. We're going to run a loop. I'm going to run from 3 to the last results, and it's really quick, so it happens very fast. What I'm going to do is run a loop, and we're going to run a loop starting at row 3 all the way to the last row. Pulling that up because I need to get those project names and I need to put them in the right column and the right row. So that's all we need to do. Get the right column, right row, and place that project name right there. So starting our row, the project scheduled row, the row is what? Q, and the result row is the result row. What is the result row? Well, of course, the result row is 3, so we know that Q in the result row, sheet 4, that is where our project scheduled row is +1. Let's take a look at that. What is in Q? Q is located our resource row. That is the row that our resources are located because we've brought them over right from here, right? Q, our results row, is going to pull up our resource name from B3. It's going to match them to a resource name. Why is that? Because they're coming right from here. So what I've done here is I've taken all the resources from our resource list and I've pasted the links into the project manager, right? So this Fred is a link from resource. So this starts on row 4, but it's coming from row A3. So what I need to do is I need to have a formula that says, hey, Fred is on row 3, but add 1. Why are we adding 1? Because Fred starts on row 4 here. So for example, in our product resources, I need to know the resource row. We can use that with a formula. We're going to match. What are we matching? B3. What are we looking for? We're looking in the resource name named range. What is that named range? We go into the named range and we go down here into resource names and we tab over. We're going to see that our resources are located here. It's the dynamic range, just as we always do, the same type of dynamic range that we used throughout this application. So we're looking for Fred, right? I'm looking for Fred here and I'm going to find him right here as the first one. I'm going to find Fred right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2. Why am I adding 2? Because I want to know that Fred is on row 3, right? Fred's on row 3, but he's the first one found. So I need to add 2 to make sure that Fred 3 is the accurate row. And of course, then up we got the project. So we know Fred's on row, Sally's on row 4, Lisa's on row 5. It just tells us what row they're kept on. So that's important. So now when we bring their row over here, all I need to do is really add 1. Fred's on row 3, we know that, but in the project, he's actually on row 4. So we just need to add one. So we know that the schedule row for Fred is 4. So when we see it's sheet 4, Q, right? Q is the column where it +1. That's our resource row +1. That tells us what row our resource is on because we brought it over. Now we need the column. What is the column? Remember we described it is the day. We're looking for the day, right? The first, the second, third, the day, plus the results row. What is in row? The day of what? The day of what? The day of the start date, right? I need the day of the start date, right? So let's look in that into the project resources. O is our start date. So what is the day? I need to extract 20 from this. I need to get 9 from this, and I need to get 16 from this. So all we need to do is take the day, right? Just like here, equals day, right? And then all I need to do is get 9. So it's basically the same thing. I just need the day. I need that 9. So we do that exactly in VBA. Now, if I have that 9, how do I get it into here, right? On the 9th, I need to get that into column 29. Column 29. So I just add, column 24. Column equals, column 24, right? Column 24. So all I need to do is add 15, right? So we know the day. Now we know all we need to do is add 15. So let's go back to the code. So now all we need to do is get the day of that date, add 15. Now we have our column. Now we have our row. Now we have our column. Now we have everything we need to place that. So we cells with sheet 1, the cells, remember, because both the column and the row are dynamic numbers, we need to use cells. Otherwise, we can use range. When we know the column, we can use range. But when both the column and the row are dynamic, we're going to use cells. So with sheet 1 cells, the project row and the project schedule column equals what? It's simple. Equals sheet 4 and the results row. As we loop through it, and is where our project name is located right here. And it's right here. We filtered it out. We filtered it. I selected a day, so let's go back so we can get the full list so we can see that. Okay, now back into it. So and is the day. So we're going to go through all of these and loop through them. And we know the column, we know the row, and all we're going to do is going to place these project names right into the schedule, just as I said on the start date. So that's it, and that's how we go. Okay, so the cells, the project name equals and the row project name. So that's where it goes. And the next result row. Now there's one little condition here which we had, and I wanted to show you the ability, but let's continue on with this macro and I'll show you how we want to get the names on the first day of the month, just in case. So the last scheduled row equals sheet 3 and XLF. What is that? Let's take a look at that. Sheet 3 is the resources. So now we're going to run, I should put a note here. Sheet 3 is our resources, so we're going to run our row. But here's what I also want to do. I want to go a little bit beyond that, something a little bit special. What I want to do is, let's say we go into the next month. Now you see this site redesign? This didn't start on February 1st, right? I really want to it really started here. This particular job starts on the 20th, right? And it goes until the 30th or the 4th or something like that. It goes until the 4th of the next month, right? It goes until the 3rd of the next month. But I want to pull, I don't want a blank space. I want to pull here on the 1st. So I want to run another loop so that I can get at least the names on the first day of the month. And we can do that with the following lines of code. So we're going to get the last scheduled row, sheet 3A. Here's sheet 3. Right? And the resources. So I'm going to run a loop, but I need to run a loop for all of the employees, just the employees. So, or the resources in this case. So we're going to look at the resources, and I need to know the last row. And the last row in this case is 14. So I'm going to run a loop from 4 to 15. Why 4 to 15? 4 to 15. But I need to know how many there were, and we can just use the last row here to get that number, 14 plus 1. That's going to get us our loop. So what I want to do is I want to run a loop all the way from here, and I want to see if there's any job numbers here or here. If there's a value here in DL, column DL, if there's any kind of a value, then I want to place that job name project name right here. So we're going to run that with this loop because I want them to. So the last schedule row is going to actually be our resources plus 1. Remember, our last one's on 14, but we wanted to make it 15. And now we're going to schedule the row starting at 4 to 15, 4 to 15. We're going to run a loop. If DL in the schedule row does not equal empty, remember we just went over that. If starting at 4 going all the way to 15, because that's the number of resources we have. That's the number. How do we know that number? Because we've pulled that right from here. We know we have 12 resources, right? So we pulled that, we got that, we figured out how many to go, and now what we're going to do is we're going to start here and go all the way down to here, and if there's any number, if any job with value, we need to get that number and put in the job name and put it in right project. I keep saying job, project, same thing. So we need to put it right here. So that's what we're going to do inside this loop. So if DL and the scheduled row does not equal empty and P in the scheduled row does not equal empty, P, we want to make sure that there's actually something there, then add the project name on the first day of the month. P in the scheduled row does not equals empty, sorry, must equal empty. If there's something there, we don't want to replace it, right? So if there's empty, then add the project name. So just in case if there's something here already, we don't want to replace it. So only in the case when it's empty, in that case, put the project name. So how do we get that project name? We do that with the following line of code. We're going to find the project name so we can set the found job. We're going to look for that. The found job is a range that we've defined up here as a range, and that's going to be equals sheet 2 in the range the project number, right? That's a named range. That's all of our project numbers. So we're going to find, what are we finding? We're going to find the project number. In that case, what I just showed you is 1. We're looking for project number 1 and need to know the row it's on, right? So we're going to look in all of the project list here, where will we find 1? In fact, it's on row 4 here. So I need to pull that. Once we know the row, I can then figure out I know in column B, and we have the row, so we can then figure out and determine the project name. So that's what we're going to do through that line of code. So we know we've set the find, and now if not found is nothing, and of course that means it is found. If not found is nothing means it is found. Then P, right? P and the schedule row, the value of that equals B. Remember, our project names are in sheet 2B. Sheet 2B is where our project names are found. This is sheet 2. Column B, this is where found. So now we just look for the row that's found on, and that's what we're going to find it and place that right in P and the row. Place it right there. So that's how we do it. So we find it's going to be the found job row. Assuming it's found job row, that is where we're going to find our project name. So that's another way to put the job names right in there. So there's a few different ways. So we've got that on because we're just using this for one column, just the first column. So that's going to place that project name in column 1 even if that project didn't start on the first of the month, because I wanted to show there even if it didn't start. So that was really important. So I wanted to show that to you. So now you see how the projects are loaded. Let's focus on how we get to the previous month and next month macros. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Now we have a few macros. So the idea is what I want to do is I want to move to previous, but if we go to previous January, but if I go to one more month previous, I need to show December, and then I also want to make the year one less. And of course, if we're in December 2018 and I click next month, I want to move to January. I want to increase the year to 2019. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we did that inside the macros. Previous month, we're going to focus on sheet 1. Now B5 tracks our month. If you remember correctly, B5 is always tracking our month number. So B5 is here. That's always going to track our month number. So if for some reason we're clicking on previous month and we know the selected month is 1, then we need to know to do a few things. We need to know to make this month 12, to make it December, and also to decrease the year by 1. Otherwise, only decrease the month by 1 and do everything else, and then set this to 1 month before. So we can do just that. If B5 equals 1, then B5 equals 12, December, and give it the R2, which is our month value of December, and our year is in X2, subtract that by 1. So that means if we're using previous month, we need to do a few things. Change the month number from 1 to 12, change the month name from January to December, and of course, bring the year down 1. Otherwise, that means the month is not 1. If it's a month, then I want to do two things. B5 is equal to just 1 month less. So for example, if it's on May, we need to make it April, and we're going to take whatever it is and subtract it by 1. And then what I want to do is the month name, I want to take that value, and I'm going to replace it with whatever is in A and 18 plus the month number. What is the month number? The month number is in B5. Why A and 18? Well, let me show you that. That's going to locate the next month down, the next month up. So if May is here, it's going to locate 18 plus whatever it is in there, and it's going to locate April. So we're going to use this list in column A to place the month wherever it goes here. So wherever it goes here, that's how we're going to place the month. And that's how we can find the month, and we're going to place that month right here. All right, so that's it. And then once we've set that up, we can then run our project schedule load. Run this macro one more time because we've changed all the days. And next up is the next month here. Now we have here in sheet 1, B5. Again, we're doing pretty much the opposite. If B5 equals 12, if it's December, the current month December, then we need to do a few things. We need to change the month number in B5 to 1, change the month name to January, of course, and increase the year in X2 plus 1. Otherwise, assuming it's not 12, then of course we're just going to increase the month 1 up from whatever it is, and we're going to use A and 18 plus the month here, So that is how we're going to do it. And so that is how we just, again, we determine our month based on the new value in B5, because we've already changed the value. So now all we need to do is locate that month. Locate it in column 18 plus whatever the number is. It's going to locate our month, and it's going to put it right in R2. And of course, we're going to run the macro that reloads our schedule, which we went over. And next up, we're going to focus on the show filters. These are pretty simple. We don't have much going on yet. And on this macro, I don't have anything inside the filters just yet. But here you can see when I click this button, it's going to show this column. And when I hide it, it's going to hide it. So what I've done is I've given these two buttons name. If we click on this button, filter projects, you'll see that's the show filter button. And of course, if we click on that button, we're going to see that the hide filter button becomes active. Hide filter button. So we've named those two buttons, and based on clicking those, we've assigned those to macros. So if you right click on the filter button and you click on the assign macro, we'll see that that is macro has been assigned called show filters. And if we click on that again and we click on the hide filters, we assign the macro, and we see that a macro called hide filters has been assigned. So based on that, we can run some macros based on what we've assigned. Let's take a look at those macros. The show filters, all we're going to do is we're going to hide the show filter button, right? We don't need to show that anymore, but we do want to show the hide filter button. That's important. We want to show that, hide one button, show the other. And in this case, of course, since we're showing filters, we want to take columns M and N and take that entire column hidden, of course, false. So we want to show that. When we see entire column hidden false, that means we want to show the column. And likewise with our hide filter macro, again with sheet 1, we are going to take, in this case, the opposite, the show filter button. We want to show that, and yet we want to hide the hide filter button. And of course, in this case, we're going to be hiding the columns. Hiding the columns equals true. So we get to hide those columns, and that's how we run the hide filters. All right, next up, we're going to show you, and actually next week, I'm going to show you how they have the ability to add attachments to any project. We've already made this functioning, but I'll save that for next week. And of course, we've got a brand new attachments, which I'll show you. Of course, you can download this and play with it for yourself, but we have a brand new project attachment list, and we've got some criteria. We're going to run an advanced filter, and we've got the results right here. And if you've seen attachments, this is going to be familiar with you. If not, I'll look forward to teaching you that and showing you, bringing you up to speed. We've got a lot more. We're going to also probably add a brand new setup field. I've got this. I think we're going to put a brand new setup. I want project types, project colors. A project status may be color, and a weekly schedule. So we've got a lot to cover, a lot we're focused on. So that's just an idea. I haven't thought that I'm putting my ideas here. We may have a lot more to go in the setup screen for schedule, but I'm just jotting those notes down because that's something I want in the future. So we're going to probably call this setup screen so you know what's going on with that. Okay, now we've seen how we get the job numbers over into the project. We see how we get the job names, the project names into the schedule, but how do we get these colors? We have two colors. We've got a green for our projects and we've got an orange for our selected project. So how do we get that? Well, of course, we're going to use conditional formatting. Now, there's a few things we know. We know that for the entire length of the project, we have a number here, right? We have a number from January 9th to January 16th. We know that, but I want the colors to appear here. So we can use that. All we need to do is focus on a formula here based on the applies to here. So all we need to do is just go ahead and, so let's drop this down. We'll go ahead and look at the conditional formatting here in the conditional formatting, and let's take a look. Manage rules. We see just a few different rules. For the green, let's take a look at the green. I want, basically the idea is if there is a number to the right, if there's a number in these cells right here, I want the green to show up here. So we're going to focus on DL4, and you see how it's dynamic. There is no dollar signs, right? There are no dollar signs. It is not absolute. It's dynamic. It's going to be cover everything below and everything to the right. So that is our starting point, DL4. And where is DL4? Well, we can find DL4 is the first row and first column where we may have a value, DL4 right here. So if this is blank, now the important thing is we want to make sure that the column and the row are inside, so that's where, so our applies to is also going to be on 4. So we're saying here is if there's a value in DL4, if it's not blank, then color it green. But we're not coloring DL4. If you look at the applies to starts on P4 through AT37. And as long as it's not absolute DL4, we can applies to does not have to be in the same cells. So we have that. That's what that's going to do, is going to color every cell with a number. Every cell with a number starting here, and it's going to apply to here. So the applies to is here. So that means every cell with a number is going to color this area green because we're applying to that. Now, what about the orange? The orange is not. The orange is something different. The orange is basically what I want to do is, this is our selected job number, right? So I want to say if the job number, this job number, anywhere it's found on here, color these cells. So there's 3 parts to this conditional formatting. 1, if the job number, and of course this is absolute here, this is absolute because there's only one cell that's going to affect it, I4, so that's going to be absolute. Our checking to see if it's going to be anyone is not absolute, it is dynamic. Starting at DL4, it's going to be dynamic, so you can cover this entire range. And of course, it's going to apply to P4 starting this range. So let's look at that and see what that looks like. Manage the rules and take a look at the orange. Again, here we see the rule I just described. I4. All right, absolute I4, dollar signs before the I, dollar signs before absolute. This will not change. However, DL4 is dynamic. You see, it is a dynamic. There you go. Now it can go for this can be applied to any field in the range. And there's another circumstance. I4 cannot be blank, right? If I4 is blank on a new one, we don't want to apply orange. Okay, so there's 2 conditions. I4 must equal D4, and of course I4 cannot be blank. I4 would be blank on a new project. So those are the 2. When those 2 conditions are met, then color the cell orange. And what cell are we coloring orange? Again, our main range, the applies to is P4. This works well because DL4 is dynamic. That's very, very important. Okay, so that's how it works. Now there's a few things. If I just have those rules, we're going to get these borders in here. I don't want to show these borders on jobs. I want it to show it without borders. So how do we do that? Back into the conditional formatting we go. Let's take a look at this conditional formatting right here. DL4 does not equal blank, and DM4 does not equal blank. What are DL4? Those are the first two. If neither one of those are blank, then what do we do? Again, let's take a look at that. If this is not blank and this is not blank, what do I want to do? I want to take out the border between them. Of course, we're not talking about this border. We're talking about the applies to border. We're talking about this border right here. That middle border, I want it gone, right? I want it gone, but only when this is blank and this is not blank and this is not blank. So when there's two consecutive columns and rows that have values over here in our formulas, then apply the color. So where the formula is here, the applies to, we're applying the conditional formatting into a different field. That is how. So then in that case, I don't want. So here you see there's no borders on the right side. So let's look at that. Under the conditional formatting, go back into that same rule, and we're going to edit the rule, and we're going to look at the format. And the border is, we're showing all the borders except we've cleared out the right border. So that's how we do that. Now there's one other one. This one right here. What is that? Let's take a look at it. 04 equals 0. What is 04 and what is the format? That is just the top row. That is used for this, right? That is used for this. That means I don't want to color. So as soon as we add a new technician, I want to put that bottom border right here. So in this case, let's take a look at that one more time. Manage formats. That's used to just show only the rows where there is a non-zero. Why are we using non-zero? Because this is a 0. It's a linked cell. It's linked to project A15. If we look at project A15, there's nothing here. So what's going to be here is an empty cell, but this one's not empty. So when we look in the conditional formatting, we manage those rules, when we take a look at this and we edit the rule, and we see that the format, we've removed all the borders but the top one, So that's very, very important, because we do want, so if this is blank, I do want to show the top border. But if this is blank, so this allows us to show the top border, especially if this one contains a value. So that's how we did the conditional formatting for the names. And let's take a look at this one. And in this case, I just gave it a fade, a little bit of dark blue to light blue. In case 04 does not equal 0, that means it does have a value, I want to give it that blue fade and applying it to only column O. However, this got applied to all of them because that border covers all of them here. So that's how we get this dynamic table. So if all we have to do is add another resource right here. We look back on the project, and now we see the borders and the fades are all there. So this table grows as we add using conditional formatting. All right, great. I'm glad I got to show you that conditional formatting. That's really, really important. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. If you love learning Excel and you want to see more Excel, I do have an amazing Excel resource guide. So it's got 1,000 resources, over 6,500 PDF links, and of course 100 websites and blog, 100 Facebook groups, 100 utilities, and these are all links to many resources. Some are free, some are paid. We also have 100 paid courses. It's an amazing resource guide. It's fully updatable, so you get lifetime updates. That helps us support it. So if you want to pick that up, I think you'll love it, and it'll be the best resource guide you ever had. So I'd appreciate if you'd have a look at that. Until next time, thanks so much for joining me, and I appreciate all your shares, likes, and comments. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.